For 2,000 years, one name has been synonymous with betrayal. Judas, the disciple who sold his teacher for 30 pieces of silver, the ultimate traitor. But here's an uncomfortable question almost nobody asks. What if Judas didn't betray Jesus because he stopped believing in him? What if he did it because he still believed, just not in the Jesus who showed up? What if Judas was expecting a warrior king, a revolutionary who'd overthrow Rome, and when Jesus refused to fight, Judas tried to force his hand? Today we're going deep into the most hated man in history, really, and asking a question the church has spent centuries trying not to ask. Was Judas actually right? So let's set the scene. Judas was one of the 12, not a random outsider, but one of Jesus' closest, most trusted followers. He held the money for the group, and that's not a minor detail. You don't hand the treasury to someone you don't trust. And in 1st century Judea, the air was thick with expectation. The Jewish people had been waiting for centuries for a Messiah. And the popular expectation wasn't really a gentle teacher who would get executed, right? It was a king, a liberator, someone who would raise an army, throw off Roman occupation and restore Israel's throne like David once sat on. And many scholars believe Judas may have been drawn to Jesus for exactly that reason. The miracles, the crowds, the growing movement. This looked like the beginning of a revolution. But Jesus kept doing the opposite of what a revolutionary king would do. He told people to turn the other cheek. He healed a Roman soldier's servant instead of striking him down. And when he rode into Jerusalem, it was not on a war horse, but on a donkey. A deliberate, humble, anti-conquest image. And for a would-be revolutionary, watching his cause slip away, that's not inspiring, that's infuriating. So here's the theory that's fascinated historians and theologians for generations. Maybe Judas didn't betray Jesus to destroy him. Maybe he betrayed him to corner him, to force a confrontation with the authorities, believing that once Jesus was backed into a corner, he'd finally unleash the power everyone expected. Call down angels, fight back, become the king Judas thought he signed up for. And if that's true, Judas wasn't trying to end the movement. He thought he was pushing it towards its climax. Now, skeptics of this theory point to the money. The Gospel of Matthew says Judas asked the chief priests, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they counted out 30 pieces of silver. Now, that doesn't sound like a man forcing a prophecy, that sounds like a paid informant. And that's fair. The text does present greed as a real motive, and even in John's Gospel says Judas used to steal from the money bag, so this isn't a clean, sympathetic reading. The Bible itself doesn't let Judas off easy, but here's what's strange. Right after Jesus was condemned, Matthew tells us Judas was overcome with remorse. He didn't celebrate, he didn't spend the money, he ran back to the priests, threw the money on the temple floor and said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." And then he took his own life. That's not the reaction of a man who gets exactly what he wanted. That's the reaction of a man whose plan collapsed in the worst possible way. There's also a wilder piece of this puzzle, a text called the Gospel of Judas, a Gnostic manuscript rediscovered in the 1970s dating from around the 2nd century. And in it, Judas isn't a villain. He's Jesus' most trusted disciple, the only one who understands what Jesus truly is. And Jesus specifically asks Judas to hand him over, saying he'll sacrifice the man that clothes me. Now, important caveat. This text isn't part of the Bible, and it wasn't written by eyewitnesses. It comes from a Gnostic sect with a very different theology, writing over a century after the events. Most historians don't treat it as reliable history, but it proves something interesting. Even in the ancient world, people were uncomfortable with the idea that Judas was simply purely evil, and were rewriting the story to make sense of it. Here's where it gets theologically messy. Christian tradition holds that Jesus' death and resurrection were the entire point, the plan since before creation, which raises an uncomfortable question people have wrestled with for centuries. If the crucifixion had to happen for salvation to happen, did someone have to be the one who set it in motion? Was Judas playing a necessary role? Jesus himself seems to acknowledge something like this thread. In Matthew he says, "Son of Man will go just as is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." That's a strange, heavy sentence. It holds two things at once. This had to happen, and you are still fully responsible for choosing to do it. Judas wasn't a puppet forced into betrayal. He made a choice for his own reasons, and that choice happened to intersect with a larger plan he did not understand or control. So back to the question, was Judas right? If Judas was hoping to force Jesus into becoming a political revolutionary, no, he was catastrophically wrong. He fundamentally misunderstood what kind of king Jesus claimed to be. Jesus wasn't there to overthrow Rome. He was there, according to the Gospels, to overthrow something bigger, sin and death itself. Judas was betting on the wrong side of victory. But here's the uncomfortable part worth sitting with. Judas's mistake wasn't that he expected too little from Jesus, it's that he expected the wrong thing. He wanted power on his terms, delivered on his timeline, and when Jesus didn't perform on command, Judas tried to force the outcome himself. And that's a very human impulse, wanting God to move your schedule in the shape you expect. So Judas isn't just a villain from 2000 years ago, he's a warning about what happens when faith curls into control. Whatever his motive, greed, disillusionment, or a revolutionary gone wrong, Judas' story isn't really about one bad man in a dusty first century story. It's a mirror. It asks each of us, when God doesn't show up in the way you expect, do you walk away in despair like Judas did? Or do you stay, even in the confusion? That's the real question this story leaves behind. And if you want more deep dives into the darker, more complicated corners of faith and history, subscribe, because I'm always digging through something. Peace out.